Hey folks, welcome to the Resilient Christian Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Ratliff, and today we got a special guest with us, Lonnie Jones, the man from Huntsville, Alabama, one of my buddies. So he'll be talking to us about the inside space. All right, Lonnie, man, I tell you what, it's been a long time since we've talked. I just kind of want to give the audience, the listeners, a little bit about you. To me, you're a brother in Christ. You're a minister, counselor. You're the guru of climbing everything, and the rope knot master, rappelling master, and I just consider Lonnie Jones a great friend, and he's sometimes a personal counselor as well. But Lonnie, can you give us a little bit more about yourself?
I'm a minister of about 40-something years. I started in youth ministry in 1980. Recognized that my ministry training was not sufficient to deal with some of the modern problems I was running into with kids. And so I asked the elders to let me train in psychology, and that turned into a master's degree in 92. And then I worked for the church up until 98 and went into private practice. And my private practice is a combination of counseling, experiential education, and consulting. When I left that full-time youth ministry job, I worked part-time at Maysville with Tim Oberson for 14 years. And then when Maysville made a change in their youth ministry, I started being the intergenerational minister at Meridianville. So I see clients 2 or 3 days a week. I'm a chaplain with the local SWAT team. I train with them once a week. I'm not a police officer. I'm not an operator, but I spend one training day a week with them and go. I go with them when they do their thing. I've been doing that for 32 years. And then
rappelling upside down out of Apache helicopters.
Well, they found out I had a background in adventure education and let me take them rappelling one day. They had been trained by a Vietnam era Green Beret, and modern rappelling was way different than what those guys do. And so they let me be the de facto rappel master for the team. And so I still get to have access to some things, and we get to rappel. The last time we rappelled as a team, only 4 of us got to drop out of the helicopter. But to practice for the helicopter, we went into the Von Braun Center and rappelled out of the rafters over the auditorium.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you've ever been to EYC in the South Hall, yep. I've rappelled off those rafters too. I spoke at EYC one year. I said, the last time I was in this building, I was hanging from that rafter up there.
Yeah, and I remember that. We were there for that, and I remember you saying that, and the very thing, we looked up, and we were like, man, okay. And then we started trying to figure out how he got over there and all that stuff. So
well, you can throw a rope. You can throw a rope up over anything, and there's a technique for climbing it. There's 100 versions of it. I use a system called a single rope technique. Using a foot lock, but when I hunt, I use a Longhorn Agile hitch and a Garda hitch, which is a guy named John JRB Tree Climbing invented most of that stuff, and so that's what I'm hunting out of when I hunt with a saddle. But anyway.
Oh wow! I tell you what, it never ceases to amaze me. Hey, but if I'm ever down in Alabama, I want to go on the helicopter ride, but I am not going to rappel out of it. I'll tell you that.
Well, the helicopter belongs to the state.
So that ain't going to happen.
Yeah, our city doesn't own it, and the state guys came up and did some training with us.
Yeah,
really. And the little rope men that I make, I gave one to the pilot in the Alabama State Trooper colors, and he said, "Well, I hate to do this to you, but everybody who flies this helicopter is going to want one of those, and all the mechanics." So I think I bought 400 feet of cord and made 32 gray rope men. And if you see the Alabama helicopter, there's a little rope man hanging from the window.
That's awesome. I tell you, just, we met at CYC several years ago. And then from there, we struck up a friendship. I thought of you as a mentor and reached out to you, talked to you a little bit about youth ministry, and it carried into some other things. And then Oath came about, and you and I kind of meshed our thoughts together and worked on that. And I give you a lot of the credit around the Oath conference that's held here at Paintsville. So I definitely appreciate that. And I kind of just Like I said, just want to thank you for that. And you mean a lot to us. And we're going to talk a little bit about grappling with life, controlling your inside space, the book that you wrote. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, yeah. So I have a really weird interest in self-defense, and I started goofing around with self-defense in high school and thought I was pretty competent until I ran into the boys who did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I talk about that story in the introduction of the book, but I started going to this guy's gym, and I've known him since he was 15, and he would let me take the time to talk about performance anxiety and self-esteem issues with his professional fighters and his competitors. And so I thought as a contribution to their sport, I would write a book about controlling your inside space. Now, if you're grappling, the inside space, you'll hear anybody commentating a fight talk about, that inside space. So I use the metaphor of jiu-jitsu, but use the idea of the inside space as your heart and your soul,
right,
and your head. And so I basically have 10 principles that if you used them in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you'd be, fairly competent. And if you use them in life, then you'll protect your inside space.
Yeah, and that's awesome. You talk a lot in there about emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Kind of touch on that a little bit and explain that. I had the definition of that is the ability to understand and label our own emotions. Is that correct?
Yes, and then once you understand and label them, you respond to them with self-regulation. And so self-regulation involves delayed gratification, impulse control, and motivation. And so once I understand the machine, the me that's me, the next component of emotional intelligence is empathy. Can I recognize and respond to your emotions? People who can do that are typically spiritually mature and mentally healthy. And people who can't do that, and the difference between can't and don't, the people who can't do that are mentally ill.
Right. And then the ones that don't, they're just that. They're choosing not to do that.
Well, they're either uneducated, immature, haven't developed, yet, suffering from some kind of trauma that makes them egocentric or makes them only focus on their own stuff. And so that's kind of my marker for, am I dealing with a mentally ill person or am I dealing with somebody who has maladaptive behavior?
Gotcha.
And the difference in can't and, you have a capacity or you have a deficit. I can't dunk a basketball. You might choose not to. I can't.
I can no longer.
Okay, well.
Right, but I definitely get you. In your book, in that section, one statement that you make in there, and I have it in quotes, controlling the inside space is eliminating the excuses.
Yes.
So that kind of goes along with what you were saying, is having the ability to do so and then choosing to do the same.
Right.
Having the ability and not choosing is a totally different story than what you're talking about, correct?
Correct. Absolutely.
All right. So, how can a Christian mindset help overcome some of the challenges that we come across on a daily basis?
So, when you look at Paul's famous statement in Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's not about running marathons or climbing Mount Everest. It's about learning to deal with circumstances. Because when Paul talks about that, he's not talking about accomplishing great feats. He said, I've been elevated, I've been abased, I've been full, I've been hungry. And all these things I've learned that I can do all things through Christ. So he's talking about, I have the ability to respond to my circumstances rather than my circumstances control me. Same thing in Hebrews 11. You get this list of he summarizes. I don't have time to talk about Jephthah and David and
Right.
Samson and Barak, and what he describes is superhero Marvel comic book movie endings. And then as he talks about, they beat armies and they protected themselves from lions and they withstood the fire and the sword. And then he just stops and says, others were tortured and imprisoned and killed and sawn in half. And so these people had exactly the same faith, but they had these really different endings. Your faith will not change your circumstances. But the message of Hebrews is don't let your circumstances affect your faith. And so you've got this list of, and then you get into chapter 12 and he says, and you're surrounded by these witnesses. Well, that word witnesses sometimes could mean martyrs. And so since you've got this group of martyrs, and I don't believe the cloud of witnesses, the martyrs anymore, is everybody in chapter 11. I believe it's that last group of guys who had these tragic endings. He says, so when you decide it's too hard or too rough and you want to quit, look a martyr in the face and tell him, they're picking on me at school, so I'm going to leave Christianity. Okay, they're bullying me on Facebook. I don't think I'm going to be a Christian anymore. And so, these people had horrendous circumstances, but it didn't change their faith.
Right. And that's exactly what we're trying to get to is how can we have that mindset? How can we mold ourselves into that mindset? One of the things that you say in there is a 3-question series, Forget It and Drive On. And I think you refer to it as FIDO.
Yeah,
right?
The FIDO series.
Yeah. So is it true? That's the first part of it, right?
Right.
Is it true?
Somebody says something bad about you or mean to you. You ask, is it true?
And the second is,
can I change it? And then if I can change it, does it need to be changed? And there's some things that I've chosen about myself that I'm unapologetic about. I'm not going to change those things. And if you answer yes to it needs to be changed, then somebody's told you something you needed to hear, and you got to man up and do it.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. You got to man up and do it. Now, I want to talk also, because I always hear this phrase. I've heard it throughout my life, and it took me a while. I'll be honest. It took me a while. You call it maturity or whatever it is. It took me a while to kind of understand this and come about to the point to where I wanted to do what was told, and that's where I control what I can control.
Yes.
And I think that you speak to that a little bit in the book as well. Mm-hmm. Once I was able to understand that and was able to, give focus to the things that I can control, and the things I can't, it's just that. Those are things I can't control. So therefore I just let them go.
Right.
Once I was able to do that, it seemed like everything just got a lot better for me. Not that my circumstances changed, so to speak, but just my mindset overall changed.
Right. And the other part of that is that, there are some things in life that I don't control, but I control my response to things when they are out of control.
Right.
And so you've got that, hey, I'm not responsible for things I don't control. And the paired version of that is I'm not going to let you control things that don't belong to you. So I'm not going to take responsibility for your mood, your success, your failure, your happiness, but I'm not going to let you control that about me either. And so it's this reciprocal thing. If we started to wrestle, I'm going to put top pressure on you. I'm going to make you responsible for your weight and my weight. And you don't want my weight. I'm weigh about 175 pounds, but if I get it on top of you, you think I weigh 400.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I remember when we were down there visiting, we went to 10th Planet. That was one of the first lessons that Brandon taught us, was that very fat thing that you just said right there. And it was one of the hardest. Number one, it was the most strenuous workout I'd ever done in my life. Was trying to move dead weight off of me. And number two, it was very challenging.
And Brandon calls it soul stealing pressure. and so if I'm responsible for whether or not you go to church, if I'm responsible for your addiction, if I'm responsible for your mood, if you can walk in a room and go, Lonnie, you made me mad. Well, I'm responsible for something I don't control. That will suck my soul out.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I articulated in the book, but if I had the power to make you mad, I also have the power to make you happy. So if I'm in charge of your moods, why am I choosing the sucky ones?
Yeah.
That's like, Jackie calls and says, hey, you're in charge of supper. I go, not broccoli again. Well, no, if I'm in charge of supper, there'll be no broccoli.
Yeah. Amen to that. Let me ask you this. Go ahead. What were you saying?
It's a dumb thing. The things that I eat vegetables. That's how I eat salads. So
What I was going to say is how do we what would be some of the processes, some of the steps, or some of the protocols, or how would we develop or begin to work on ourselves to be able to do that? Because if we are a person that allows that to bother us to the point to where we have miserable days or miserable times or sad days because of, simply what you said, like if somebody comes in and says, hey, you made me mad, and that just destroys my day. What can I do to help my mental state to the point that I'm able to put that into place that it's supposed to be and then remain joyful?
okay, so I think that the first thing you've got to do is when somebody tries to give you responsibility for them. I think the self-talk comes in first. Well, if I had the power to make you quit, I could make you stay. If I had the power to make you use, I could make you sober. If I had the power to make you mad, I could make you happy. So just confront that with the idea that I'm sort of responsible for me. Because if life is just a series of responses, Paul tells Timothy, God didn't give us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and of self-control, or a sound mind.
Right.
And so if I do A and you must do B, then you don't have free will. You get to choose how you respond to what I do. And so understanding that's a false premise that somebody's going to lay this at my feet. Now, I may do things that are regrettable. I may be making a choice. As a youth minister, a parent calls and says, hey, you sent my kid home from camp and you shouldn't have done that. Okay. Well, regardless of what rule he broke, the rule said if you do this, you go home. Now, do you think I sent your kid home from camp because I hate him or because I love him?
Right.
Well, it feels like, okay, and I'm going to ask, will you give me credit that I did what I did because of the right motive? Yes.
Yeah.
And you can disagree with what I did, but if you'll give me credit for why I did it, I'm okay with that. And then that doesn't make me the bad guy. It puts us on the same page. And so when somebody tries to give you that responsibility, first of all, don't accept responsibility for things you don't control. And then second, say, well, I did what I did, and you've labeled it as a regrettable event. Well, now let's talk about my motives. Did I intentionally hurt you? Did I intentionally defraud you? Was I intentionally mean to you? Paul says, have I become your enemy because I told you the truth? Sometimes you tell me things I need to hear, and I get to decide whether that makes me mad or not.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Lonnie. Thank you. That is awesome. And as a youth minister and some of the guys that I talk with that play sports, because I also coach sports in the past. This is actually the first year that I haven't coached anything, but nevertheless, there's a lot of times that some of those failures comes in and it makes these thoughts of inadequacy. There's thoughts of failure, and it's stuff that they can't control. Like for instance, if I can only put 9 guys on a baseball field,
right,
and you got the 10th guy who is not quite doing so well, but he doesn't get put on the field or in the starting lineup. Well, at that point, there's a lot of negative thoughts going through his head, and a lot of them are directed at himself. Of course, he's mad at me. Right. For whatever reason, but there's a lot of negative stuff that goes back to himself. I guess what I'm trying to say is, what about the mindset where those things that we can't control, and we relate those to our self-worth?
Okay, so there's a thing that we talk about when we deal with trauma and also with cognitive behavioral therapy called implicit beliefs. It's the meaning that I give to something, and that meaning may or may not be accurate. Joseph's brothers show their dad a bloody coat, and they go, hey, you recognize this coat? And Jacob sees the coat and says, this means my son is dead. It means he was torn by a wild animal, and it means I'll never be happy again. Well, the meaning he assigned to that is just not accurate. Right. Just not true. So to the degree that my perceptions affect the meanings now, if I take if I take responsibility for things I can't control, then the meanings are always, you're mad and it's my fault. You failed and it's my fault. You cheated and it's my fault. So, what I do with, when I talk to a lot of athletes, and I go, how many kids are in your high school? Oh, 350. Of those 350 kids, how many of them play baseball? 15. Of those 15 kids, how many of them are on the field? 9. So if you're on the team, you're in the top what percent of your school?
Exactly.
If you've ever been on the field for 10 minutes or 10 innings, you're in a higher percentage on the field.
Sure.
Now, does the coach think you can play? Well, no, the coach hates me. Then why are you on his team? Because he didn't have to pick you.
There you go.
Now, you got to believe that there's something you need to change or improve. And sometimes it's not about the best player. It's about the best chemistry.
Sure.
Has nothing to do with fielding errors or batting errors. It may be that you and the shortstop have this thing that doesn't work, and this other guy in this shortstop does.
Yeah.
And if you get and Jackie, when she coached volleyball, talked about the chemical mix of her team more than she did the level of talent. Now, you give me a bunch of superstars that don't work together, and it's a nightmare. And you give me a bunch of average kids that love each other.
We just dealt with several years at University of Kentucky basketball with that very thing. And I'm not going to mention any names, but things have changed now. But I think I'm hearing you say. Go ahead.
That's even true. We had a chief, and that's been 2 or 3 chiefs ago, and he was like, "Well, why can't I just give anybody a machine gun and let him be on the SWAT team?" Because being on a SWAT team is about chemistry.
Right.
Do you fit with this elite group of guys, and do they trust you, and do you trust them? And every time they've circumvented our selection process and made us take a guy, he never works out.
Yeah.
We don't have to run him off, he'll leave because he just doesn't, he's not cut for the material.
Yeah. And one of the things that I'm pulling away from what you're saying is sometimes we perceive things that are not really there. Like, for instance, I get a phone call or a text from my boss. It's very easy to let my mind go into places that could cause me stress or worry. And then a lot of times when I do get those calls, it's nowhere near the sort of what I thought it would be.
So we do this thing. What happened? What does it mean to you? What does it mean about you?
Uh-huh.
And then does it mean what I think it means? There's a reel on Facebook. If you look it up, it's called Implicit Beliefs.
Uh-huh.
And I'll send you I'll see if I can find it on my phone. But it basically, your brain solves problems. You've read those paragraphs where the first letter and the last letter were right, all the other letters were wrong, and yet you can read the paragraph. Well, your brain tries to make sense of things.
Yes.
So you take a teenager. A teenager is egocentric. Everything is about him, right?
Sure.
He can't walk by a window and not look at himself. He can't look at his phone and not take a picture. Well, if everything is about you, then everything is also your fault. Oh. Hey, that guy picked on me. There must be something wrong with me. Mom and dad divorced. I must have caused that because they fought about my grades. Hey, that guy sexually molested me. Somehow I was asking for that. So if your perception is everything's about you, then it's super easy for that to become, hey, this is also, it's my fault.
Yeah.
And so when somebody picks on you, let's suppose somebody makes a racial slur about me. Well, does that say more about them or more about me?
Well, it's more about them. The way that you feel about it.
But most people don't understand that because so, and this is dumb. I go jogging sometimes, and when I go jogging and a dog barks at me, do the dog and I have personal issues?
So you have a problem.
Why is this dog barking at me? Who else does the dog bark at? Who else does the dog bark at?
Everybody.
The UPS guy, the Avon lady, the Jehovah's Witnesses. So the dog's barking at me because guess what? It's a dog, and that's what he does. Why is this bully picking on me? Because he's a bully, And most bullies are insecure and afraid to be at school.
There you go.
Why is this guy mean to me? Because he's a mean person. So when you start saying, okay, what happened? What does it mean to me? What does it mean about me? And then does it mean what I think it means? A lot of times we come up with, this is really saying something about this other person and has nothing to do with me. Why was this person rude to me? Because they're rude.
Yeah. You are what you are. Hey, which is a perfect segue to go into what I was going to talk about next. You will be what you will see. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's straight out of your book there, talking about, positive thinking and positive mindset. Fantasies become reality. There's so much that come out of this book that I just absolutely eat up and love.
Well, I'm so glad.
It really has been a blessing to me. And one of the most, impactful lines out of that book was, say it enough, hear it enough, or think it enough, and it will become.
That's true.
So, where does that come from? Because, you hear a lot of visualization talk in the sports world. Me dealing with, in professional baseball, and then, of course, my father-in-law, Johnny LeMaster, played in the major leagues, and then I've got all kinds of connections and stuff in college sports and pro ball as well. Everybody heard, practiced, and dealt with visualization. The visualization kind of, it came from this frame of thought.
Right.
So what is it about our minds that helps us in regards of how does the visualization and positive thinking work together to make our lives better?
So Paul is going to talk about whatever things are good, lovely, good report, if there's any praise, if there's any virtue, think on these things. Why? Because your brain, when it sees a positive image, can hang on to that image. But when you start thinking in the negative, you create a picture of what you don't want to happen. If you're sitting on a free throw line dribbling a basketball and you think don't miss.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what picture popped in your mind?
The ball rolling off the rim, hitting the front.
And what happens?
You miss.
You're sending in the outfield, that pop fly goes up, you go, man, don't miss. Because the picture you created in your mind misses.
Yeah.
There's a guy named Frank Proctor, and he does a class called Shooting with the Unconscious Mind, and he's a pistolero.
Okay.
And he says, if you'll just relax and point your pistol, your eye and your hand point at the same thing. But when you have to, Navy SEAL out and go through all these machinations that you've seen on YouTube,
yeah,
you're messing. His motto is, let it do what it do. But the minute, if I'm like bow fishing,
yeah,
you have a giant gar and a little gar. You draw your bow back and you think, don't hit the little gar. Guess what gar you just hit? Because your brain doesn't filter out the negative. It just sees that picture. And in the super relaxed state where you're very suggestible, you're just going to do that thing you didn't see. Tell a little kid, don't get near the edge and don't fall in. What did he see?
Yep, doing just that.
Get near the edge,
and
fall in. And guess what they do? In they go. So if you can start thinking in terms of watch the ball into your glove.
Yeah.
Put your hand in the cookie jar. Follow through with your shot.
Yeah.
Aim at the back of the rim. Whatever those things are, once you start talking in those positive terms, the picture in your mind is the thing that should happen, not the things that shouldn't happen.
Yeah. We're changing that visualization to the things, like you said, positive things that should happen. And we can definitely apply that to our lives in the Christian walk as well.
Well, in Colossians, Paul says, do not touch, do not taste, do not handle. They appear to have wisdom, harsh treatment of the body, but they are of no value against the indulgence of the flesh. But then when he says, whatsoever things are good,
there we go,
and holy and right and positive and praiseworthy. So we teach our kids for years, you're a Christian. Yeah, well, how do you know? You don't do this and you don't do that and you don't do the other. And that's about as effective as the old DARE program was.
Yep. That's a good point.
But when you teach your kids, hey, let's be pure. Can you read that and be pure? Can you say that and be pure? Can you do that on a date and be pure? Now we've got what is purity?
Yep.
And then you've got this picture that leads you to where you want to be, not this thing of you don't want to get there.
Yeah.
And that's positive visualization in most everything that you do.
That's good stuff. That is a great point, Lonnie. I appreciate that so much. So, all right. Tips for controlling your inside space. Did you have something? Were you holding your finger up for something?
No, I was making my microphone not
okay.
shake. I got all animated with bouncing around and
I
stuff
love
was
it.
moving.
I love it.
I thought I was having I said either my mic's moving or I'm having a stroke, and I had to check and see which one it was.
Well, I'm glad it came out that you were all right and it was just your mic.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah.
So I'm looking for tips on controlling your inside space. Now, this is if you were talking, I called you on the phone. And I'm like, Lonnie, I need your help here. I need some tips on learning how to control my inside space. And I know the first thing you're going to say, control your head, control your body is one of the aspects. But what would be those tips that you would give everybody?
Okay. First of all, let's analyze what happened. Tell me the event. What do you feel about it? And what do you know about it? Because if it's only emotion, you're not making good choices. If it's only intellect, you're not making good choices. But when what you know and what you feel are in agreement with each other, now I can start making some sense of this thing. If you separate the intellect and the emotion on either scale, you're not going to make good choices. The Pharisees over-intellectualized the law, and they were legalists.
Yep.
David did not use his intellect. Well, David intellectually knew the law. David intellectually knew what he was doing with Bathsheba was wrong. David intellectually knew that he had to cover it up by having Uriah murdered.
Yeah.
But he's blissfully going along with no consequences until what happens. Nathan the prophet tells him a sheep story.
Yep.
And that metaphorical connection to his heart made the intellect and the emotion run together. You are that man.
Yes.
And so the first thing I got to do is, okay, this happened. I'm in crisis. What are my feelings? What do I feel about it? And then what do I know about it? Now, if I've got feelings that I don't have any facts for, I'm gonna get rid of those,
Yeah.
or at least I'm gonna challenge them. And then once I get to that place, and okay, now this is what happened, and this is how I feel and how I think about it. Are there some meanings here that are invalid? What does this say about me? What does this say to me? And to the degree that those meanings can be challenged, the resulting emotions are either going to be healthy or unhealthy. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, Lonnie. I tell you what, that's some good stuff. It seems like every time we talk, you're giving out just some brand new knowledge, and it's awesome. I thought every time I not that I think I know everything, but nevertheless, I think I know a lot. And when I talk to you about those things, it's like I don't have a clue, and I learn every time that I talk to you, and it's awesome. And I just appreciate you so much for the stuff that you do.
You're very, very kind. I consider you a friend, and I appreciate the time that we've spent together. And I talk about this stuff every day. I do this for a living, so
it's awesome.
If I talk to you about baseball, I would learn something.
I don't know
because I know nothing.
I don't. Hey, listen, I don't know. Maybe if you were talking to Johnny, you'd probably learn something about baseball. With me, not so much.
Okay, well, maybe it's basketball then.
Well, I just, Lonnie, I just appreciate you giving us this time and being on this podcast.
I'm so honored to be on your Resilient Christian podcast. And, I hope it's very successful and you get a lot of listeners. If folks like this kind of content, then I've got a podcast too.
Yes.
Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. We're in season 5. Every Tuesday morning at 6, we drop a new one. And the Lord has blessed us to be able to not have to miss an episode yet.
I was just getting ready to plug that for you, and you hit it.
I appreciate it.
And it's awesome. That's one of my favorite podcasts. I try to listen to it often, and it never fails. I always get a giggle or two and a chuckle or two because you know what? Some of the things that you talk about, like some of the past, growing up events or whatever, I can visualize you in those situations. And I get tickled. I'll be driving down my car because that's when I do it. I listen to podcasts and sermons and things. Windshield time is what we call it in the world of business.
Right. Yeah.
So, I'll start chuckling while I'm driving, and it's great. But nevertheless, Lonnie, you've been great. You've given us some awesome stuff. I do appreciate it. Again, let me give you another plug for Grappling with Life. Obviously, you have many other books out there, but Grappling with Life, Controlling Your Inside Space by Lonnie Jones. Obviously, this is available in various different places. Lonnie, we can find this on Amazon. Is that correct?
Yeah, just find it on Amazon.
Yep.
And you can go to my website and click the links to the books, but it's on Amazon, pretty easy to find.
Okay, and what is your website?
LonnieJones.org.
LonnieJones.org. So folks, go out there, visit LonnieJones.org. There's a lot of content out there, very helpful books. This one's an awesome one. This one's great. All of his books are great, but I really, really love this. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll catch you later, man. Hey folks, thanks for watching the Resilient Christian Podcast, where we focus on renewing our mind and changing our actions. We'll see you next time.